Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Children of Memory by Adrian Tchaikovksy. I'll talk very briefly about the author. I'll go into a spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading next time. I reviewed both of the earlier books in the series, and I'll have a playlist if you want to check out those videos below. I won't be having any spoilers for Children of Memory, but the earlier two books, I may have to give some plot points away for those first two books. So if you haven't read either of those two books, I would read both of them before coming back to this video. Adrian Tchaikovsky is a famous science fiction writer. This is by far his most famous series. He's won an Arthur C. Clarke Award for Children of Time. He's pretty prolific. He's written a few other books as well, series as well. But this is kind of the series I think he's best known for. This book follows a character, a space crew, really, but primarily a character named Miranda, who we've met in earlier novels, who has joined with the Nodian virus that was introduced in the second book. She is on an intergalactic spaceship, space crew, with characters from both the first books and the second books, as they are going to search for the Ark ships that were launched in, I believe, book 1. And they have heard the signal of one of those Ark ships that is orbiting a planet called Ymir. We also follow the life of an Ymirian girl named Lif as she goes about her normal day, and that's really where the plot is, where these two plots intersect, is when the crew of the ship, I believe it's the Skipper, is the ship with Miranda, the Portids, the Octopi, as well as two new members who are, I believe they're uplifted birds that are from the planet called Rourke. There's a lot going on in this book. I think that it's, for all the stuff that's going on, I thought the book was very readable. I think Adrian Tchaikovsky writes in a style that lends itself to page turning. I think there are a lot of big ideas in the book, but I also think he writes in a style that allows you to follow it pretty clearly. I think the hook of the book starts with it follows the crew of the Ark ship that's commanded by a man named Holt as they first reach this planet, the planet Ymir, where they realize that the terraformation process that was supposed to start millennia before has failed to really develop anything past microbes on the planet's surface. So the planet is kind of encrusted with this green baseline of life, and they have to find a way to survive on this planet. I thought that first part was really awesome hook, and I thought that was maybe my favorite part of the book, is following the crew as they actually arrive to the planet, only to find, after all this hardship, that it's going to be extremely difficult for them to live on this planet. And I think that Adrian Tchaikovsky, I think, should be applauded for having a lot of big ideas and trying to bring, I think, more of a thinking man's perspective to science fiction, which I think is welcome. I think for this book, I had I think the bigger disappointment with this book to me is how it lines up to the previous books. I think it's by far the weakest of the trilogy, and if maybe I was coming into the cold, coming in from the cold, I maybe would feel differently. I think he does do a good job of summarizing the earlier two books. If for some reason you pick up this book without reading the other two, I don't think you'll be completely out of water. But I think it does behoove you to read the first two books. I think the issues that I had with this book is I failed to really like many of the characters. And I think the first two books did a very good job of answering really interesting philosophical questions. The first one is hypothetical or speculative questions. The first book is really about what would happen if another species other than primates were able to evolve to human levels of intelligence, and what would their societies look like. We have that really with the Portids in the first book, and I think that's an interesting question. I think the second book is really his attempt to really think about what something that truly is alien would look like, and I think he does that with the Nodian virus. And I thought that was, in its own way, very interesting. I think the other book maybe also starts to suffer from, the weight of the earlier books of having to interact with these same characters and carry them through. You have Kern again in this book, and so by this book, I think there are some philosophical questions. There's a lot of philosophical questions. Some of them are things, old chestnuts, like, if you, almost like a Star Trek thing, where if you have a civilization that is, that you're able to use your technology to alleviate their pain, but in doing so would diminish or destroy their culture because then it becomes dependent on your technology. is that wrong? Should you do it? Should you not do it? I think there's a question of whether or not certain things or certain beings in this novel have sentience. I think there's a whole Ship of Theseus thing going on. So there's a lot of different questions that are being asked. It feels like, unlike those other books, that this all kind of gets jammed into the last 10% of the book, and I felt that that kind of hurt the flow of the book. I didn't really find myself connecting with any of the characters other than the character of Liv, who I did have a soft spot in my heart for, but other than her, there wasn't a lot there for me. And I think because he kind of keeps bringing in all these characters, you have all this weight of the previous books that kind of accumulate. I think this book sets up a fourth novel in the series. I do wish maybe he had gone on to some other stuff after this novel. I wish it had been more of a finishing point, because this book to me feels almost as if it's the first half of another sequel. And I think if he had taken this book and maybe used it as the first half of another book, I think it would have been more effective. I got to about the first half of this book and I was like, okay, I don't know where he's going. I'm interested to see what he does. And instead of kind of following that plot point, the book does jump back and forth in time a little bit. And so instead of following that plot point, he goes back, and it just kind of this slow reveal of what is going on in this book, in my opinion, took way, way, way too long. And I think there were definitely pacing issues because of that. And I think after that midpoint where something I wasn't expecting happens, I was on board up to that point. And then I just didn't like where the rest of the story went. And I feel that I think the book suffers from having to feel that it needs to kind of carry the weight of Kern and all these other characters instead of maybe introducing new characters. And so I feel the book felt kind of beholden to the past books in a way that I don't think necessarily helped the story. So those were my issues with it. I think if on its own, I think it's fine. I think that the issues in it have been explored in other places maybe a little bit better, but I do appreciate him having this philosophical bent to it. At this point, it felt like there was just a lot of stuff going on, and instead of having this book giving itself kind of room to breathe, it did feel like everything is kind of jammed in the last 10% of the book, and everything kind of gets explained there. And if I maybe had connected with some of the characters a little bit more and I had enjoyed the plot a little bit more, maybe I would have given him a little bit more leeway with some of those things. But overall, I think that if you're a fan of the series up to this point, you're probably going to read this book and maybe come to your own conclusion with it. But for me, I definitely feel like this book was a step down from the previous two books. And I'm hoping that he's able to, at some point, if he continues with the series, and it sounds like he is, I hope he finds a way to have a clean slate and kind of maybe break away from the current cast of characters and bring in some new blood. Because I think that there's a lot of interesting ideas in this universe. I think the idea of the arc ships are really an interesting way for him to be able to explore all kinds of different speculative questions in a really cool way. I feel this book suffers from having too many ingredients in the dish, and I think if he had maybe simplified it a little bit, it maybe would have been a cleaner, more enjoyable book. But it is a pretty quick read. I think that I read it really in just a few days. It is a page turner. I just wish maybe I had gotten a little bit more out of it, and I wish I had maybe enjoyed the characters a little bit more. I don't want to say the book feels, when you get to kind of the general mystery of what's happening in the book, I don't think it's necessarily a cheat as far as what happens, but I definitely didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping to. And I think some of that, I just hope that if he continues to write in this series, that he's able to break away from some of the baggage that he's kind of accumulated over these now 3 books. And if he continues to do it, I hope he finds a way to have kind of a reboot or a fresh start. Adrian Tchaikovksy, Children of Memory. Next time I'm going to be reading West Heart Kill, or I will be reading a selection that was recommended to me by one of my viewers. So until next time, if you have liked this book, I saw on Goodreads it got about a 4, which is not something I was shocked by. It's about right. And if you're someone who's read this book, please feel free to leave your comments below as far as if you liked it, if you didn't like it. Please, again, be respectful and just make sure that you're avoiding spoilers for folks who haven't had a chance to read it yet. And if you have watched this video up to this point and you've enjoyed it, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll leave the link below to the 2 previous reviews that I've done for his stuff, and I'll also leave the link for the playlist that I'm going to create for all 3 of the videos. Until next time, bye.